Next on Newsmax Prime, TR gave us the square deal, FDR gave us the New Deal. Now, is Obama presenting us with a bad deal? And just how bad is this deal with Iran? We'll ask Pete Hoekstra and J.D. Gordon. Then, our president compares himself to Ronald Reagan. Michael Reagan reacts. Plus, Donald Trump sits down with Ted Cruz. What might they be talking about? Our political panel will talk about it as Newsmax Prime for Wednesday, July 15th starts now. Good evening. Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, Donald Trump's popularity continues to rise. A new Washington Post ABC News poll shows almost 6 in 10 Republicans see the billionaire turned presidential candidate in a favorable light. More on that a bit later. But first, selling the deal. President Obama tries to convince everyone that the nuclear accord with Iran is good for long-term national security. He held another news conference this afternoon, once again defending that agreement.
We'll still have problems with Iran's sponsorship of terrorism. Its funding of proxies like Hezbollah that threaten Israel and threaten the region. The destabilizing activities that they're engaging in, including in places like Yemen. And my hope is that, building on this deal, we can continue to have conversations with Iran that incentivize them to behave differently in the region. This deal is not contingent on Iran changing its behavior. It's not contingent on Iran suddenly operating like a liberal democracy. It solves one particular problem, which is making sure they don't have a bomb.
For more on this, we're joined by Pete Hoekstra, my old colleague on Capitol Hill, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who joins us from Newsmax Washington, along with former Defense Department spokesman J.D. Gordon. Gentlemen, we welcome you back to Newsmax Prime. And Pete, we'll begin with you. Can you buy the president's argument and his reasoning on this?
I really can. I mean, this statement that the president, the tape that you just played, is unbelievable, where the president says this is not about us trying to change Iranian behavior. That's exactly what we ought to be doing. We want to change their behavior in terms of, reaching out and trying to grasp that nuclear weapon. But all the other things, their support of terrorism, their support for destabilizing regimes, their attacks against U.S. interests and those types of things. That's exactly what we have to change, and what this agreement is going to do, and the president has acknowledged it. He doesn't expect them to change their behavior necessarily. They're now going to have a lot more money to fund these kind of terrorism activities against their neighbors in the Middle East, against Israel. It's a very, very bad start, and I'm surprised the president even comes out and admits that he doesn't expect Iran to change its behavior in the Middle East. And he hopes it does.
J.D. Gordon, the president, trying to defend this, he says his opponents politically here at home have not presented a more reasonable alternative. Is that, in essence, telling us a bad deal is better than no deal at all? Is that what he's trying to sell the American people?
Hi, JD. Great to see you. I agree with Pete. I think this is a strategy based on hope. This is the worst security agreement I've ever seen since Munich 1938. Never before have so many major powers given up so much for so little. And instead, a totalitarian, supremacist dictatorship gets whatever they want. In this case, Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon with this accord. The only way we could stop them is to stop their uranium enrichment. The UN Security Council even passed 6 resolutions forbidding it, but yet President Obama caved on it. And number 2, in order to prevent them, we would have to have anytime, anywhere inspections. But yet again, Secretary Kerry and the president caved on that as well. So now it's managed access. The Iranians have 24 days, believe it or not, from when the inspectors ask for access, 24 days to decide if they're going to do it or not. So that's ludicrous. Anything they're doing could be hidden in that amount of time. So under this scenario, Iran will get a nuclear weapon. It's only a matter of time. The president is not being honest with the American people.
Pete, our friend Andrew McCarthy wrote a column on this deal and said the provisions added in the Senate, designed by Tennessee Republican Bob Corker, may have had adverse effects because it had the Republicans abandoning the constitutional mechanism for dealing with the treaty, and in fact allows President Obama to skate by, just keeping a minority of Democratic votes in this formal review that's coming up on Capitol Hill. Do you agree with the assessment of Andrew McCarthy?
Yeah, I really do. I think with the severity, and we ought to get away from the term saying this is kind of a deal. This is an agreement. From my viewpoint, it has all the characteristics of a treaty. The president should have gone to the Congress, and the Republicans should have stood firm in the Congress saying, we want to treat this as a treaty. It needs an affirmative vote of more than 50 votes in the Senate and a majority of the House. Passing this kind of historic agreement, historic in a bad way, agreement with Iran, and being able to do it by just holding 34 Democrats in the Senate saying we support this. There may be 66 people in the Senate that oppose it, but it's still going to move forward. It should have been a treaty.
Well, let's turn to J.D. Gordon. Our president told the New York Times this agreement could only be judged a success based on whether Iran acquires a bomb. Alan Dershowitz had this to say on this program yesterday about taking such a gamble.
You do not roll dice when it comes to nuclear weapons. The last time we rolled the dice with North Korea, it came up snake eyes. We lost. Right. North Korea developed a nuclear weapon, and my fear is that Iran will develop a nuclear weapon in 10 years or even sooner.
All right, J.D. Gordon, your take on what Professor Dershowitz had to say. Is he right?
Professor Dershowitz is absolutely right. North Korea allegedly gave up nuclear weapons in 2005. Well, in 2006, they exploded a nuclear device underground. And that's how we're going to find out when Iran has a nuclear bomb, when they explode one underground. And that may happen after President Obama is not in office. And he'll just say, look, when I was president, they didn't have one. So I think President Obama is so concerned with his legacy and so concerned about transforming America that he's putting us at risk, Israel at risk of being wiped off the map, and he's putting all our Arab allies at risk. So this is really a shameful episode in U.S. history, and we have President Obama and Secretary Kerry to thank.
J.D. Gordon, Pete Hoekstra, you have our thanks for spending time with us on Newsmax Prime. Now let's turn to political commentator Michael Reagan, who joins us by telephone from L.A. A reminder, you can always find Michael on Twitter at Reagan World. And Michael, President Obama recently sat down with Tom Friedman of the New York Times, and in that interview, he explained his rationale for the Iran deal while invoking your father's name.
Where I completely admire him was his recognition that if you were able to verify agreements, that you would negotiate with the evil empire that was hell-bent on our destruction and was a far greater existential threat to us than Iran will ever be.
Michael, he went on to say that this deal is a risk we have to take. Your reaction to this comparison the president makes with your father?
Well, you know, Barack Obama is not a stupid person. I mean, the comparison he makes for, you know, to point the finger at Barack Obama, that somehow he is the savior of all of this. But we must remember that Ronald Reagan was negotiating with a country who had nuclear weapons, and they were aimed at the United States of America. He's dealing with a country that we're trying to stop from getting nuclear weapons. And that's a big difference in all of the negotiation. And the other side of the coin is that Ronald Reagan did walk away. In order to put the deal together the way he wanted it put together, Ronald Reagan had to walk away. And he walked away in 1986 in Reykjavik, and ultimately Mikhail Gorbachev came to Washington, D.C., and signed that agreement in 1987. Sometimes you have to walk away in order to get truly what you want.
Michael Reagan, we appreciate your reaction to President Obama's assessment that somehow he's Reagan-esque and showing the very clear difference. Michael is going to stay with us, but right now we would ask you to let us know what you think about all of this. And you can let us know by using email, Facebook, Twitter, and our own website, newsmaxtv.com/comments. There's more ahead. Stay with us.